Nigeria, listen up. Why you are struggling to buy a liter of fuel? Why you are trekking? Because transport fare has tripled. There is a war. There is a war of word going on at the highest level. We just had the African Energy Council talking about the global gridlock. Donald Trump says he's negotiating a massive gift from Iran. Iran come out 2 hours later and says the US is negotiating with itself. The market is confused. Oil prices are fluctuating between $100 and $113 per barrel. But before we go deeper, like this video, subscribe to this channel, because here we don't just report headlines, we break it down so you understand exactly what is going on. Now the experts are saying this is an opportunity for Nigeria. Our crude oil is suddenly attractive. Our budget was set at $65 per barrel, but we are selling at over $100. Fair enough, it is a good thing for a country to have its own primary export in high demand. It's fair enough to celebrate a windfall. But here is a pivot. If we are making an extra $35 to $40 every single barrel of oil we pump, why is the Nigerian citizen feeling more pain today than when oil was $50 per barrel? Why is the windfall for the government becoming a downfall for the masses? The analysts are talking about asymmetric warfare in the Middle East. They are talking about insurance prices for ships in Strait of Hormuz. But let's talk about the asymmetric warfare being waged against the Nigerian pockets. The ideology in Abuja is simple. Subsidy is gone. Deal with it. They tell us the market forces must determine the price. Fair enough. But when the market forces push oil to $113 per barrel and the government gets enough massive revenue boost, where does that money go? They talked about energy security on paper. They tell us LNG Trend 7 is the future. But you cannot build a future on a hungry present. If our leaders are complaining about global disruption, I want to ask them, what have they done with the years of calm to prepare us for the storm? We have no strategic petroleum reserve. Functionally, we are naked. The US has reserve. The G7 has reserves. Nigeria has theory. We are a nation that produces what we don't refine and buys what we should own. That is the root cause. It's not just the war in the Middle East. It's the war of incompetence at home. Let's bring this home. The government is seeing a massive headroom in the budget. The dollar is coming in. But I have to ask the people in the Ministry of Finance and the NNPC, where is the transport subsidy you promised will cushion the blow of the fuel price hike? Why is the windfall only visible in the luxury SUVs of politicians, but invisible in the price of a loaf of bread? Where was this market optimism when the refineries were supposed to be fixed for the 10th time in a decade? Why is the urgency stronger about aligning global prices than it is about aligning with local wages? Where is the transparency regarding the extra $35 per barrel we are currently making while the mothers in Lagos can't afford to cook with gas? You want us to be resilient. You want us to sacrifice. But sacrifice is a two-way street. If the citizens are sacrificing their comfort, the leaders must sacrifice their greed. Let's talk about reality. While the Iranians and Americans are arguing about who sent a gift, the Nigerian civil servant is looking at a bank alert that cannot buy a bag of rice. Think about the farmer in Benue. High fuel price means high transport costs for its crops. That means the tomato that should cost 100 naira now costs 500 naira. Think about the small business owner in Aba using a generator because the national grid is down again. Every dollar added to the price of oil is a nail in the coffin of their profit margins. This isn't just a complex situation for analysts. This is a life and death situation for the millions living under the fear and trauma of poverty. We are told to be proud of our crude oil premium, but you cannot eat premium. You cannot pay school fees with headrooms. Survival must come before pride. If accepting international help or changing our entire energy policy is what it takes to bring down the cost of living, then do it. A nation's first responsibility is to protect its citizens from hunger, not just from foreign armies. We have had the expert talking about medium-term views. I don't want medium-term view for a man who is hungry today. The government needs to hear this. If there is a windfall, we want to see it in a stabilization fund that actually stabilizes the lives of Nigerians. We don't want to hear about LNG Train 7 in 3 years. We want to hear about a transportation subsidy today. We demand answers to the Nigerian presidency. If the world is paying us more for our oil, why are we paying more for our survival? To the NNPC, where is the strategic reserve? Why are we the only major producer that is functionally naked in an energy crisis? Nigeria is not a laboratory for economic experiment. It is a home for humans. Until the big men stop worrying about their geographical signals and start worrying about the kitchen table signals, we will not be silent. The market is swinging, but our life shouldn't be dangling. What do you think? Should the government bring back a smart subsidy for transport and food? Or should we just keep sacrificing while they collect the windfall? Drop your thought and comments below. Let's get loud. This is the reality. Deal with it. If this analysis makes sense to you, like this video, subscribe to this channel, share it, because Nigeria is rich and has to reflect on the lives of its citizens. Nigerians need results. I will see you in the next one.
That we can deploy. These are the sort of times where we need to start to wear our thinking cap and start to functionalize something of that sort. Whether it's from a private sector standpoint or it is from a government standpoint, we have to try to start to think about energy security in a big way.
So you're talking about the reserve now, very good one that Nigeria should be thinking about. We also see India right now looking to Russia to, for its April contract for oil, 60 million barrels. Does this create opportunities for Africa, or does it put pressure in terms of competitiveness? You mentioned that Nigeria does not have reserves. From this standpoint, what should we be doing, especially looking at other African oil-producing countries?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. This is the point I made. There's a lot that Africa, and actually when I say that, I mean Nigeria, Angola, and some of these large countries. There's a lot that we have to do and learn from this conflict. Well, I was just making the point. If you look at the G8, so the G8 countries, I'm talking Italy, UK, US, Canada, Japan, and France. They came together under the banner of the IEA, the International Energy Agency, and they released 400 million barrels onto the market so they can taper the price. 400 million barrels. Okay, that's a huge number. Now, if you come to the home front of Nigeria, we produce crude oil, we just put onto the market and off it goes. Some of it goes to Dangote, very small amount goes to Dangote refinery, which is great for energy security, but the bulk of it gets onto tankers and is taken onto international markets. We do not have currently a strategic petroleum reserve, where you would say if something happens today, you know what, Nigeria can deploy that reserve to cushion the effect on its citizens. We do not have that. Angola does not have that. Ghana does not have that. Equatorial Guinea does not have that. Much of the oil-producing states in Africa, do not have anything of that sort. So what I'm trying to say is, should there be a big discussion around that? Even if it's not a national one, could there be an African strategic petroleum reserve? Just for example, China alone hold approximately 1.5 billion barrels of crude oil at the moment. So many countries understand that energy security is a big thing. Unfortunately, here in Africa, we haven't really worn that hat to make that happen. So I think, the Minister of State for Petroleum, or even President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is the Minister of Petroleum, has to start to think about that, because without that, we'll be greatly and greatly exposed.
Okay, I did see the report that Nigeria is speeding up licenses for digging up oil wells, possibly to take advantage of the higher prices we're seeing in oil. How do you think that will feed into, say, Nigeria's plan for energy security and possibly start building a reserve, possibly, if they're even considering it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great plan, So under the current licensing framework that they have right now, being run by NUPRC, ASR, there's no doubt Nigeria is giving 50 new blocks onto the market. But, well, these are 50 new exploration blocks, okay? These are basically, to describe it, these are blanket green areas where you have to go and try to find crude oil. Even when you find it, it will take you about 4, 5, 6 years before you can bring those molecules onto the market. So that in the short to medium term, you can forget about that. In the long term, yeah, potentially, depending on what you find. What I'm talking about is, given existing scenario, existing fields that we have today, Nigeria needs to look within its existing, the crude oil we're producing today, and try to find those efficiencies of selling some, but putting some into a strategic petroleum reserve. Is something that is massively missing for Nigeria today in terms of its petroleum strategy. So I'm talking pure play crude, but even beyond crude oil, it needs to also have a strategic a strategic reserve for refined products. Other countries have the same. So all of these things have to be done and have to be done in tandem. Now, the licensing round is fantastic. There's no question about that. It's one of the first big ones that Nigeria is doing in a very long time. But it's not a strategy for the short term. This is, at best, a medium-term strategy. I'd say a long-term strategy. But I'll say this, well, some of the big things that we've seen in the Nigerian space is OPL 245. OPL 245 was the old oil block that was stalled there in a lot of litigation with Malibu Oil, ex-minister Dan Otete, and all of the challenges that we saw with it. In the last month, we've seen that government was able to take that OML, unbundle it, remove all of the litigations around it, and push forward a field development plan for that. And it's one of the biggest fields, by the way. I think it's about 9 billion barrels of crude oil. Okay, so these sorts of unconventional thinking that can bring barrels onto the market in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's the kind of unconventional thinking that Nigeria needs to have. The technical potential to get and produce crude oil beyond 2 million barrels per day, Nigeria has that. Technically, we can produce beyond 2 million barrels per day. But when you look at it fundamentally, when it comes operationally, that is where we fail. So I think a lot of these lateral assets, some of them that have been sat down for a long time, some of the marginal fields perhaps, some of the ones that we can get some production upsides, that is where we can get the very quick wins and start to produce really high up above our quota and even put some in a strategic petroleum reserve.
This is just taking us to circle back to what the IEA is saying. Right now, we're looking at over 40 energy assets damaged across 9 countries in the Middle East. How right now are we getting global supply going? What are we looking at in terms of getting supply out to the rest of the world?
Absolutely. So I think, well, this is the biggest tragedy of this conflict. It's very easy if, I think a very simple case would be if you block the Strait of Hormuz, okay, that's a deadlock for sure. Perhaps after a while that could open up, given negotiations and everything. But when you damage critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, then that damage is at a minimum and medium-term play, oil and gas developments, before you try to fix them up and get them ready. And it takes a while. And I think that is the big tragedy of this conflict, that even if we resolve this today, we're going to have a period where we'll be going through real pain. We'll be going through real pain just so we can get these assets up and running. And I think that's the fundamental question here, that a lot of these, we'll spend a lot of time just to get them off the ground, get them running, get them fixed, and all of that. And of course, a lot of money involved as well. You can see all across the board, a lot of force majeures have been declared. Some countries have declared force majeures. They're breaking the contracts because they cannot functionalize those contracts. So I really think that is the biggest dilemma. And as Africans, we must look and see, are there ways that we can look at the market and come into that market and fill that gap? Whether it's from a crude oil standpoint, a refined product standpoint, like we're seeing with Dangote, or even a gas standpoint, like we have with Nigeria LNG.
Definitely. We just hope it's not going to take weeks, I don't know, maybe months or longer for us to get these assets running again, especially thinking of the extent of damage that has already been done. Thank you so much, Ndikwo, Vice Chair, African Energy Council, for your thoughts and perspective on this as incorporated.